Sagittarius, the mask of your hidden enemy will finally fall. There are moments in life when something deep within whispers that not everything around you is as it seems. For Sagittarius, this feeling has been lingering for some time. A quiet intuition that the smiles you see, the words you hear, don't always match the energy you feel. And though you may have questioned yourself, doubted your own instincts, or even blamed your sensitivity, your soul has always known the truth. Sagittarius, you are a seeker of honesty, a lover of freedom, and a carrier of light. That is why deception has always weighed so heavily on your spirit. But the season you are stepping into now is different. The universe is preparing to unveil what has been hidden from you, to dissolve illusions, and to reveal the faces behind the masks. Not for vengeance, not to reopen old wounds, but to set you free. In this journey, we'll walk together through the sacred gates of recognition, healing, and reclamation. You'll see how the hidden intentions of others are not signs of your weakness, but proof of your sensitivity and strength. And you'll discover that the fall of masks is not the end of peace, it is the beginning of it. So stay close with me, Sagittarius. And if these words already stir something inside you, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe. Not for me, but for the part of you that is finally ready to walk in truth, unbound and unafraid. Gate 1, the subtle weight you could never name. Sagittarius, for so long you have carried a quiet unease that you could not explain to anyone else. The kind of heaviness that arrived in moments when nothing appeared to be wrong, yet your body, your spirit, your very breath seemed to tell you otherwise. You know those times when a smile directed at you felt strangely hollow, when words of praise seemed to carry a hidden edge, when you left a conversation more drained than uplifted, but you pushed it aside because you did not want to be unkind, you did not want to accuse without proof, and you certainly did not want to believe that someone close to you could wear a mask so convincing. But here is the truth you are now ready to hear. Your intuition has never lied to you. Those subtle signals were not your imagination. They were your spirit's way of warning you that someone in your orbit was not showing you their true face. And though you may have felt guilt for doubting them, or even shame for questioning the story they presented, you must understand that sensitivity is not a flaw in you. It is your compass. It is the divine protection built into your very being. The hidden enemy in your life may not have come as a dramatic villain. They may not have shouted insults or struck with open cruelty. In fact, they often come cloaked in gestures of care, wrapped in gestures that appear supportive, but laced with energy that quietly eats away at your confidence. It could be the friend who always smiles yet subtly undermines your choices with backhanded compliments, leaving you second-guessing your joy. It could be a colleague who positions themselves as helpful, yet quietly takes credit for your work or plants seeds of doubt about your competence. It could even be a family member whose words seem kind but are threaded with envy or resentment, making you question whether you are allowed to shine too brightly. These masks are powerful because they operate in subtlety, because they confuse you, because they make you feel like you are the problem for even noticing the shift in energy. But Sagittarius, you were never imagining it. You were perceiving it. And that is the gift of your sign. You see beyond the surface, beyond the words, into the energy that people cannot hide forever. You are ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion and truth, and so your spirit is naturally allergic to deception. It senses when something does not align with the vibration of honesty, even when the surface seems smooth. That is why you have felt restless around certain people without knowing why. Why your laughter shrank in their presence. Why your shoulders tightened in conversations that seemed ordinary. It was not paranoia. It was your soul trying to tell you, pay attention. And though you may have tried to ignore it, to give them the benefit of the doubt, to believe that kindness would be enough to heal the strangeness you felt, the universe has been preparing you for the moment when the mask finally falls. That moment is arriving, Sagittarius, and when it does, you will not meet it with shock, though you may feel the sting of recognition. Instead, you will meet it with clarity, because deep down you already knew. What is falling away now is not just their disguise. It is your own self-doubt, the doubt that made you wonder if you were too sensitive, too suspicious, too fragile. The fall of their mask is also the rise of your trust in yourself. Imagine for a moment how many years you gave away in silence, how often you stayed in rooms that drained you because you believed your role was to keep the peace, to be the light, to forgive before forgiveness was even asked. You carried the weight of relationships that were never balanced, where your generosity was consumed but rarely returned, where your optimism was treated not as a gift but as a resource to be siphoned. And still you did not harden. Still you loved. Still you gave. And that is the remarkable strength of your Sagittarian spirit. You do not stop shining, even when others seek to dim you. But here is the sacred shift. You are no longer being asked to shine for those who stand in the shadow of their own envy. You are being called to withdraw your light from those who only pretend to honor it. Because the truth is, when the mask falls, it is not just about seeing them for who they are. It is about seeing yourself for who you are when you are no longer entangled in their web of subtle manipulation. There is a kind of freedom that arrives when you stop trying to explain away the heaviness you feel, when you finally acknowledge that some people wear affection like armor to disguise their fear of your power. It is the freedom of no longer needing to rationalize why you feel small around certain faces, why you question yourself more after being with them. It is the freedom of saying, without anger but with complete certainty, I choose not to play this game anymore. And Sagittarius, let me tell you, when you reach this place, everything begins to change. The people who wore masks will stumble under the weight of their own pretenses, because your energy was the stage upon which their performance thrived. Without your attention, without your willingness to doubt yourself, their illusions collapse. Their words lose power. Their subtle manipulations no longer land. You will witness it in small but undeniable ways. The colleague who once seemed so confident without you suddenly struggles to maintain their facade. The friend who thrived on your validation suddenly grows distant when you no longer provide it. The family member who played victim when confronted now has no audience for their drama. This collapse is not your doing. It is the natural consequence of truth finally stepping into the room. And while part of you may ache, may feel sorrow for the connection you thought you had, another part of you will feel lighter, freer, stronger. Because the real mask that is falling is not just theirs. It is the mask you wore for yourself, the one that said, I must tolerate this to be kind. I must endure this to be loved. That mask dissolves and what remains is your true face. Radiant, courageous, unafraid of the truth. Sagittarius, you are stepping into a season where your intuition no longer whispers, it speaks loudly, and you finally trust it. The hidden enemy is no longer hidden. The shadows are no longer confusing. The truth is no longer something you negotiate. It is something you embody. And when you stand in that embodiment, you realize that the greatest protection has never been walls or suspicion or fear. It has always been the clarity of knowing yourself. Their mask may fall, but what rises is your vision. Clear, unshakable, and free. Gate 2: the mirror of betrayal and the birth of clarity. Sagittarius, betrayal is a word that carries sharp edges, and yet in your journey, it has rarely appeared as an obvious wound. It has arrived quietly, disguised as friendship, love, or kinship, cloaked in loyalty that you assumed was mutual. You have often believed that if you showed up with honesty, others would do the same, that if you gave your heart without conditions, it would be honored with reverence. But life has shown you something different. That not everyone loves as you do. Not everyone carries light without agenda. Not everyone stands near you to share your flame. Some stand near you to dim it, to siphon it, to measure their worth against yours. And the strangest part is that you rarely recognized it at first because you looked through the lens of your own sincerity. You assumed their gestures meant what your gestures would have meant. You believed their words carried the same truth your words would have carried. But Sagittarius, the universe is now asking you to accept something that once felt unbearable. Not everyone is meant to hold your trust. Not everyone is safe to receive the most tender parts of you. And not everyone who calls themselves friend, lover, or family is truly aligned with your highest good. This truth does not arrive to make you cynical. It arrives to make you wise. It arrives to teach you the difference between openness and naivety, between compassion and self-abandonment, between loyalty and self-betrayal. You see, the hidden enemy in your life was never simply a person, it was the dynamic you carried with them. A dynamic in which your silence became their power, your forgiveness became their excuse, and your endurance became the mask that allowed their mask to stay in place. But no longer. When the mirror of betrayal is placed before you, what you see is not only their deception, you see yourself, and you recognize how many times you stayed when your spirit begged you to leave, how many times you explained away behaviors that made you ache, how many times you prioritized their comfort over your own peace. This is not to blame you, it is to awaken you. Because when the mask falls, it is not about condemnation, it is about reclamation. And in that reclamation, you discover that betrayal is not the end of your story. It is the birth of clarity, the moment you begin to see yourself not as someone who must tolerate mistreatment to prove your love, but as someone whose very love is sacred and therefore deserves to be honored. I think of a Sagittarius woman named Clara, who once came to me with tears in her eyes after discovering that her closest friend had been sharing her secrets to others under the guise of concern. For months Clara questioned herself, wondered if she had overshared, wondered if her sensitivity was to blame, until the truth became undeniable. When the mask fell, Clara did not just lose a friend, she gained herself. She realized that the ache she felt each time she left that friend's presence was not weakness, it was wisdom. And though the ending was painful, it was also liberating, because it returned her to the one person she had been neglecting, herself. Sagittarius, betrayal is never about the other person alone. It is about what you learn in its wake. You learn to trust the signals you once dismissed. You learn that peace is more valuable than proximity. You learn that love without respect is not love at all. And most importantly, you learn that your spirit is strong enough to survive not only the fall of someone else's mask, but also the dismantling of the illusions you clung to. You discover that clarity hurts, but it also heals, because once you see clearly, you cannot be deceived in the same way again. Think of how many times you have wondered why you felt small around someone who claimed to love you, why your joy seemed to shrink when they were near, why your successes never felt fully celebrated. That was the mirror showing you that something was off, and though you may have doubted yourself, those feelings were the truth trying to break through. And now, as the hidden enemy is revealed, you are given a sacred invitation to stop doubting yourself, to stop silencing your intuition, to stop treating your discomfort as an inconvenience. It is not an inconvenience. It is your soul's alarm system. It is the way the universe tells you, this is not your home. And the miracle is this: when you finally listen, when you finally walk away from the mirrors that distort your reflection, you begin to see yourself clearly for the first time in years. You begin to remember that you are not too much, you are not unworthy, you are not naive. You are luminous. You are expansive. You are a fire that was never meant to be contained by the fragile structures of someone else's envy. And as this clarity anchors in you, everything begins to shift. The old bonds loosen, the illusions dissolve, and the space you once filled with overgiving becomes a sanctuary where you can finally breathe. Sagittarius, the mask of your hidden enemy will fall, and though at first you may feel the sting of betrayal, you will soon feel something even more powerful. The quiet relief of knowing you were not wrong, the profound peace of realizing your intuition was always right, and the sacred strength of stepping forward with eyes unclouded. This is not the end of love in your life. It is the purification of it. This is not the end of trust, it is the rebirth of discernment. This is not the loss of connection, it is the gain of authenticity. And once you have tasted authenticity, you will never again settle for masks. Gate 3: the liberation of truth and the power of boundaries. Sagittarius, when the mask of deception falls, the first wave that often rises within you is grief. The grief of realizing that someone you trusted was not who you believed them to be. The grief of recognizing how long you carried a weight that was never yours. The grief of mourning not just the person but the dream of the relationship you thought you had. And yet, grief is only the doorway. Beyond that doorway lies liberation, because the truth, even when it stings, always sets you free. You see, your soul has always yearned for freedom, not just in the form of travel or exploration, but in the deeper sense of being unbound by lies, by illusions, by toxic entanglements that keep your spirit small. This is why the revelation of a hidden enemy, as painful as it is, ultimately returns you to your natural state. Expansive, wild, authentic. The key, Sagittarius, is to embrace what comes next. Not only the clarity of seeing, but the courage of acting on what you now know. And this is where boundaries enter, not as walls to keep the world away, but as sacred lines that honor your worth. For too long, you may have equated kindness with self-sacrifice, believing that to be generous meant to always be available, to always forgive, to always bend so that others could stand tall. But boundaries teach you that love without respect is empty, that generosity without balance is exploitation, and that forgiveness without accountability is not healing but repetition. I think of a Sagittarius man named Elias, who once believed that true friendship meant never saying no. He gave rides at midnight, lent money he could not spare, listened to hours of complaints without ever being heard himself. He thought this made him loyal, but in truth it made him a target for those who saw his giving as weakness. When he finally faced the truth, that one of his closest companions had been mocking his generosity behind his back. The mask fell. Elias wept, yes, but then he chose differently. He set boundaries. He began saying no without guilt. He stopped apologizing for protecting his energy. And what happened? At first, the so-called friend grew angry, called him selfish. But in time the friend drifted away, because without the constant supply of Elias's energy, there was nothing left to feed on. And though Elias lost someone he once valued, he gained something far greater: peace. Sagittarius, this is the liberation waiting for you. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of peace that arises when you no longer betray yourself to keep another's mask in place. The power of boundaries is not about control. It is about alignment. It is about recognizing that your energy is sacred, that not everyone deserves access to your most vulnerable spaces, that your generosity is a gift, not a currency to be exploited. When you embrace boundaries, you begin to see relationships for what they truly are: mutual or one-sided, nourishing or draining, authentic or performative. And as you choose to honor your limits, the hidden enemies in your life will reveal themselves even faster, because boundaries are the mirrors that expose intentions. Those who truly love you will respect them, even if it requires adjustment. Those who only wore masks will resist, guilt trip, or withdraw, because your refusal to self-abandon removes the foundation upon which their illusion stood. And though it may feel lonely at first, remember this: the emptiness created by leaving behind false connections is not a void to fear. It is space. Space for real love, real friendship, real kinship to enter. The liberation of truth is not just about seeing who others are. It is about finally seeing who you are without the distortion of their shadows. You are radiant. You are resilient. You are deserving of relationships that expand you rather than shrink you. And as you step into this new season, you will notice a remarkable transformation. Your laughter returning without effort, your body relaxing without explanation, your dreams feeling possible again. Because deception always binds, but truth always frees. And Sagittarius, your soul was never meant to live in chains. The universe is now offering you the power of discernment, the strength of boundaries, and the wisdom to know that losing what was false is never truly a loss. It is liberation. And when you live liberated, your energy shifts so profoundly that the masks of others cannot survive in your presence. You become a mirror so clear that only truth can reflect in your orbit. This is the gift of the mask falling. The revelation of who you are when you no longer bend to protect illusions. And what you are, Sagittarius, is unstoppable light. Gate for the renewal of trust and the dawn of authentic connections. Sagittarius, once the mask of your hidden enemy has fallen and the dust of betrayal has settled, there comes a question that lingers like a soft ache in the chest. Can I ever trust again? This question is natural, for trust is the fabric of your spirit, woven into your very essence as someone who longs to meet life with openness and honesty. To have that trust broken, manipulated, or disregarded can feel like an earthquake shaking the foundations of your soul. And yet, here lies one of the deepest paradoxes of your journey. Betrayal does not destroy your capacity to trust, it refines it. It teaches you that trust is not about ignoring your instincts or giving yourself away without discernment, but about anchoring yourself so fully in truth that you no longer confuse kindness with compliance, vulnerability with weakness, or loyalty with silence. This renewal of trust begins not with others, but with yourself. The moment you realize that your intuition was right all along, that the whispers you once dismissed were in fact the universe guiding you, something shifts. You begin to see that the greatest betrayal was not only the deception of another, but also the moments when you doubted your inner voice. Healing, therefore, becomes the practice of coming home to that voice, listening without delay, honoring without excuse. And as you rebuild trust with yourself, you naturally begin to draw towards you those who vibrate at the frequency of authenticity. Because energy is magnetic, Sagittarius. When you stop entertaining masks, masks stop appearing in your life. The false connections fall away, and in their absence, the universe makes room for souls who see you clearly, love you purely, and honor you deeply. I think of a Sagittarius woman named Marin, who after leaving a marriage built on years of manipulation, once told me she feared she would never open her heart again. She lived for months in suspicion, scanning every interaction for signs of deceit, exhausting herself in the process. But then she began to rebuild trust with herself. She journaled her intuitions and checked back later to confirm their truth. She began to honor the signals her body gave her when something felt off. She started saying no quickly without apology. And as her self-trust grew, so did her confidence in others. Slowly, she allowed herself to connect again, not because she was naive, but because she knew she could now discern. And when love re-entered her life, it did not feel like a gamble. It felt like alignment. Sagittarius, this is what awaits you too. The renewal of trust is not about pretending betrayal never happened. It is about using it as the forge that shapes discernment, the soil in which authentic connections can grow. And these connections, when they come, will feel different. They will not drain you, they will nourish you. They will not confuse you, they will clarify you. They will not require you to shrink. They will invite you to expand. You will recognize them not by the perfection of their words, but by the consistency of their actions, not by how loudly they proclaim loyalty, but by how quietly they respect your boundaries. This is the dawn of authenticity, and it is the gift that only comes after masks fall. But here is something even more profound. As you learn to live in this clarity, you also become a beacon for others. Your refusal to tolerate deception inspires those around you to remove their own masks, to live more honestly, to love more purely. Your healing does not just belong to you. It ripples outward, reshaping your relationships, your community, even your family line. You are a Sagittarius, after all, and your fire is never meant for you alone. It is a torch that lights the path for many. And so, though the journey of betrayal and revelation has been painful, it is also sacred. Because through it, you are not only reclaiming your own freedom, you are helping to create a world where masks are no longer needed. This is the destiny of your sign. To live in such truth, such openness, such unapologetic authenticity that the very energy around you becomes a sanctuary for honesty. The mask of your hidden enemy has fallen, Sagittarius, and now with your spirit renewed, you step into a future where trust is no longer a risk but a choice, no longer blind but discerning, no longer fragile but unshakable. And in this future, the love and connection you will experience are not only deeper, they are real. Walking forward in unshakable light. Sagittarius, you have walked through a profound journey, one that began with the subtle unease you could never name, moved through the painful unveiling of betrayal, and led you into the liberating embrace of truth and boundaries. Along the way, you have discovered that the fall of a mask is not just an ending but a beginning. You have seen how deception, once revealed, becomes a mirror that returns you to your own power. You have learned that grief can be the soil of wisdom, that betrayal can be the birth of clarity, and that boundaries are not walls but sacred invitations to deeper love. Most importantly, you have come to see that trust, once thought broken beyond repair, can be reborn, not as blind faith, but as a radiant confidence rooted in your own intuition. The hidden enemy has been revealed, but you are not diminished. You are lighter, freer, more aligned with the truth of who you are. Where once you tolerated subtle manipulations, you now honor your worth. Where once you questioned your instincts, you now stand rooted in them. Where once you gave endlessly to those who only took, you now reserve your energy for those who nourish and uplift you. And as you step forward, your light becomes impossible to dim. You become not only a seeker of truth but a living embodiment of it. A Sagittarius whose fire no mask can withstand. So if these words have touched your heart, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe, not as an act of support for me, but as a declaration that you are ready to walk in your own unshakable light. Together we continue this journey of wisdom, healing, and freedom.